So now that we have talked about what is in blood, I'd like to revisit some things we talked about during our genetics unit and revisit the idea of a blood type. So in that unit, I said that later in the year, we're going to discuss what the effects of these blood types are and what they mean, and that's right now. So let's pause the video. Let's go through the reading section on your own, and then you can unpause and we'll read it together. Okay, red blood cells, which transport oxygen, make up about 41 to 45% of normal blood volume. People inherit the type of red blood cells they have from their parents. People can have 3 alleles for these red blood cells. And remember from the genetics unit, that the 3 alleles, or really like a letter, a gene you can get from a parent, are A, B, and O. Those are the 3 things we can inherit from our parents. Since people get their genes and alleles from their parents, they get one of these alleles from each parent. You get one of these letters from your mother and one of these letters from your father. This means that there are 6 different combinations of these alleles. Big A, Big A, little o, Big B, Big B, little o, Big A, Big B, and little o, little o. These alleles tell us which proteins are sticking out of the red blood cells. A has an A protein, B has a B protein, and O has no protein. In the blood, people then have tiny antibodies, and we talked about that in our immunity unit. These are the things that can latch on and inactivate invader pathogen cells, but maybe also our cells. And they have tiny antibodies that are opposite of what is on their red blood cells. I'm going to help outline this in the listening section. This is important because if the same antibodies and proteins mix, they cause the blood to clump up. Again, clump up means to kind of hook up and form little balls or clots in your blood, in your body. And what this would do then, it would cause blockages all throughout the blood vessels in your body. And this is going to be important because if we get the wrong blood type, it can eventually possibly lead to death. This could be deadly for people, but since we know about it, we can safely donate and receive blood from people with the correct blood types. Okay, now I said I'd help outline that. Let's go over to the listening section now. So if you have the alleles, Big A, so your mother gave you a Big A and your father gave you a Big A, your blood type is just A, so we just say it's blood type A. This means that on your red blood cells, you have the A protein. Now this is not a letter A, but it's really just a type, and we just started with the letters A and B. So this would mean you have the A protein on your red blood cell. Now, this also means that in your blood, floating around, these tiny little antibodies, you're going to have the opposite of this in the blood. So that would mean you have the B antibody floating around in the blood. I don't expect you to draw this, but this would mean like all your red blood cells have this little protein sticking out all over them. And it doesn't look like the letter A, but sometimes we draw it out like a letter A. And then floating around in your blood, you have these little Y-shaped proteins, and we just write a B on them just to say that it's a type. They don't actually have a letter B on them. Let's continue. If you have the alleles AO, so one of your parents gave you a big A, the other parent gave you a little o, this is still the blood type A because the A is the dominant allele. So the blood type here is A. This means that the proteins on your red blood cells are also the A type. And that means you have B antibodies floating around in your blood. Okay, next, if you have both big B alleles, your blood type is B. This means that you now have the B proteins on your red blood cells, which should mean that you have the A antibodies floating around in your blood. Now, I wanted to wait till we got here. This is really important because this shows us that, you notice how these should always be opposite. You should never have both of these in the same person because then that would cause your blood to clump. Okay, if you have big B, little o, you have blood type B, the B proteins on your red blood cells, and then A antibodies in the blood. If you have blood type AB, now you have blood type AB. You have both proteins on your red blood cells, and you have no antibodies in the blood floating around. Now lastly, for blood type O, you get this when you have two little recessive O alleles from each parent. This means you have no proteins on your red blood cells, but now you have both of those antibodies floating around in your blood. So we just call this O blood, even though it's two O's. You have no proteins on your red blood cells, but you have A and B antibodies floating around in the blood. Okay, down here, what I have shown you is a blood donation table. So this says that if you have blood type A, you can receive from A and O, and you can donate to A and AB. I would like you to inspect this table for a minute, and then I'd like you to talk about these two questions with someone. Why is blood type AB called the universal recipient, and why is blood type O called the universal donor? And then we're going to do a lab in a little bit to help us reinforce these concepts of blood types, who we can receive blood from, and who we can donate it to. Then lastly, I would like you to revisit the idea of a Punnett square. Remember, the Punnett square is this thing. And I'd like you to try and explain this question. If two parents have blood type A, B, and O, what are the possible blood types of their offspring? Try and explain your answer in a sentence or two here.